Yeah. Okay, so I got a ton of questions for you. So, if someone has never seen anything you've directed, what is the first thing you'd like them watching and why? And it could be this, but I'm just curious.
That's a really good question. I'd say To Watch because it's just such a natural, kind of vibey, chill LA movie.
I read, could be wrong, that they were developing an end-of-watch TV series. Whatever happened with that?
Yeah, we were going to do it. We were developing it with Fox, but we never quite got it off the ground. I think the pandemic hit and the usual sort of, Hollywood thing.
Sure. What do you think will surprise people to learn about making movies in Hollywood?
I think how complex it is, like in the paperwork. Every movie has like a stack of paperwork like that thick. Any day on set is like 1,000 arrows moving towards the exact same target at the same time, but they all have to be launched weeks and months in advance. So, homie. So it's like the amount of logistics, the amount of prep, the amount of organization. I mean, you have an entire department, the paperwork department, accounting, payroll. It's an immense amount of work. Just even the property on set and figuring out the insurance, or you lose a radio. It's an unbelievable endeavor.
Do you have a lot of unproduced scripts?
I have a stack literally that high. Yeah.
So if you could get the financing to make anything you want tomorrow, which of those scripts is the one that you say, this has to be the one?
I haven't written it yet.
Is it something in your brain? Is it something cooking up that could be your next thing?
Probably not my next thing, but hopefully it'll be downstream a little bit. Yeah.
You want to tease anything?
World War II.
Oh, I think you have a little history there.
I want to do like real talk. Everyone's like fascism this, fascism that. Let's see what it really looks like. Let's wake people up. Let's see what the bad guys are actually like, and see how they actually treated other human beings, and put it in a combat environment, and show the true heroism and human nature and how people came together to defeat that enemy. And there's a whole lot of stories there that haven't been told yet, and they need to be told.
I actually, years ago, I said, why do they keep on making these World War II movies? Because it seems like every year we're getting one. And then I realized as I've gotten older, this shit needs to be reminded every year. We cannot forget about what happened during that time. And it is alarming how many people just think things didn't happen or just casually want to forget.
Or they look back on it and sort of put this patina of respectability on groups and organizations that have no business having any of that. Monsters are monsters. You got to call them out.
This is actually going to be the 10th anniversary of Fury. I know, it's crazy. So if you haven't seen Fury, fucking great movie that he directed. I believe he wrote it. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head. It's a crazy cast, but the thing about that film is it had a lot of deleted scenes. There's like 45 minutes or so of extended or deleted scenes. Do you ever, for that film, did you ever want to release like an extended cut, or was the theatrical cut of that movie the one you're like, this is the one?
That's the one. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, you write a script and you're just throwing darts at the wall. You hope it works, right? Because movies are not scripts. A script is like a basic guideline. People will say things and they will say these words in a location. But when you actually shoot the stuff and convert it into film, now you have like 1.5 million feet of footage. You got to assemble that. Over time, you kind of figure the movie out. You reduce it. You boil it down. It's like making soup. You just keep boiling it down and condensing it, and then eventually it gets like the right flavor. So with Fury, that's the movie as I wanted it to be, for sure.
For people, well, actually, I'm just curious, raise your hand if you've seen Fury. Oh, so a lot of you. So you guys know that you had Brad Pitt, Shia, Logan, John, Michael. You had this incredible cast. When you think back on the making of that film, what's the first thing that comes to you?
Probably the rehearsals, because they had to feel like a tank crew. They had to operate like a tank crew. And rehearsing could be anything from us sitting, in my office in LA in the early days, just talking about characters and the situation and the dialogue and how it all works and comes together, and then running some scenes, all the way up to, right before we shot, a rehearsal would be 4 tanks 60 trained infantrymen, Brad on comms, the entire crew on comms, running an actual combat scenario with blanks and you know, blank weapons fires and things like that to get everybody kind of used to that choreography, so we weren't just doing it on the day. So it got surreal at a certain point.
I don't really like share from my side, like I try to make it all about you, but I will say I did a set visit on Fury, and I remember you directing, and you called me over to look at Video Village, and the mud, and the tanks, and like you guys were really going for it in terms of like, this was not some, you know, this was in the mud and muck.
Yeah, it was, it kind of gave me PTSD for like cold weather. I'm a Cali boy, you know, so it's like I'm there and it's like February and it's ice cold and you know, it's just a chill that gets in your bones and there's nowhere to hide from it. You're outside all day, 14 hours a day. And the crew is wearing, you know, by crew I mean, you know, Brad and team are wearing World War II, actual World War II gear and World War II clothing, and it ain't that warm. This is like life before Gore-Tex, you know, and it was just, they soldiered up. They did it.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Of all the films you worked on, which one changed the most in the editing room and why? You don't have to answer if you want to avoid this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's which editing room, and did I know about the editing room? It's Suicide Squad, obviously. Yeah.
I'm gonna. How can I say this? Does it get old, people? Because I see on Twitter, and everyone always asks you about it. Does it get like old? Like everyone always asking, or are you sort of just like, it's part of my history, people are going to talk about it, et cetera, et cetera?
It's part of my history. It is what it is, you know. And it's, you know, I would have shut up about it a long time ago if like my cut was like, oh, it's a tweaky thing. The scene is 30 seconds different, or I use different takes, or you know, there's a scene I cut. People don't understand how plastic film is how you can come to two totally opposite results with the same medium that's photographed. And so, I mean, I'm coming off Fury, right? Like, I basically made a war movie in the DC space, you know, so I made a David Ayer movie and DC's like, well, we want a DC movie, and the results are what we got. But the DNA and the character and the sense of place and the visuals were so strong in it that you know, people intuited it, like people connected to it. It's ridiculously freaking successful, but there's a vastly, vastly better version. I mean, I'm just gonna say it, I made one of the best comic movies ever made.
Woo!
That's director's cut. You know, you guys deserve to see it, but it ain't my property, it ain't my IP. And
I have to ask, because I've wanted to know this for a long time. Do you actually have a copy at home of your cut, or is it all in the vault at Warner Brothers?
It's they control it. They control the medium.
Right. Okay, I want to move on. So you go, because we're not here for that. So you worked, a lot of people don't realize, you worked on the first Fast and Furious movie. And I believe it was you who called it to go from New York to LA to do the street racing. Like a lot of the DNA of the Fast and the Furious came out of your brain. And I don't think enough people give you credit for that. So I want to actually, that's what I'm more interested in, is like, can you talk about your involvement in that franchise at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know Scott Stuber back in the day, he was like a senior VP at Universal, and he calls me up, and I knew him, and he's like, dude, there's a script, and I read the script, and it was like Italian kids in New York, and it was like no people of color in it, and it wasn't really like the racing world or like the streets that I knew. And so I told Scott, I'm like, hey bro, yeah, I'm into it, but I gotta set it in LA, and it needs to look like the LA I know. It needs to look like the people I grew up with. It's gotta be like a different thing than it is. And to his credit, he's like, yeah, go for it. And so I just do what I do, and I hit the streets, and I started talking to the heads that are out there like turning Honda Civics into 500 horsepower cars, you know, and it's like they're running like, you know, 9-second quarter miles in a Honda Civic, and I'm like, bro, what's going on? And like, this was back before any of this was legit or anybody knew about it, right? And like, these dudes are getting engines, and you know, I don't know where the parts are coming from, and like, these are the first guys to crack the computers on the custom fuel curves and everything. And I just put it all in the movie, And then Rob Cohen, the director, I'm like, bro, come on. And I took him to some car shows, and he saw the vibe and the looks and the aesthetics, and had him talk to people, and it's like the whole, you know, it's just, it was like straight up LA street culture put into Hollywood, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I just want to give you, make sure people understand your involvement.
You know what?
I'm looking at where I'm at right now. So you were one of the big first movie at Netflix was Bright.
Yeah.
That was the first one that broke through, and there was always talk about a sequel. What the happened with that?
I mean, it's like everything else, you know, Bright, you know, it's a hard world to crack, and it's hard to crack a world like that. And then, you know, it got complex, I'll say that.
Whatever happened with your script with Scarface, and how come I never saw that movie? I'm asking a lot of questions. We're about to get into Beekeeper.
It's going right in the pain.
Listen, I haven't spoken to you in years, and I'm like, I have stuff that's been built up.
Yeah, no. I was gonna do a remake of Scarface, and dropped the script, and it's one of the best scripts I've ever written, and it didn't get produced. You know, right before I was about to go prep the movie, you know, I had like an honest conversation with a senior exec at Universal, and it was like, hey man, I know you want this to be different than it is. This is the movie I want to make. I don't want it to become adversarial, and I don't want it to get taken away from me in post. So if we're not on the same page, and you respected it, it was like, yeah man, like let's call it now. But it's the best scripts I've ever written are unproduced. It's almost scary when I write like a really good script now. I'm like, oh man, this ain't gonna be.
I am so disappointed. You have been involved in some kick-ass action sequences. Do you have a favorite, or do you have one that you're like, I can't believe we pulled this one off?
That's gonna be like the opening scene of End to Watch, because it was like we blocked off like the low bottom South Central, like had all that blocked off, and I'm in the car operating camera deck, and it was just stupid. Like the way we were driving and stuff, and dudes throwing it sideways, and then we're punching it through alleys, and all that was like real. I think because I was in it and experiencing it and seeing it in a way I hadn't before personally, and so I just had that memory of experiencing it, and then I tried to cut it to make it feel like I felt. I tried to create that feeling in the edit.
Jumping into why I get to talk to you, a certain movie we all just watched. So how did this project actually happen for you? Like, talk a little bit about the genesis, and what was it about the material that said, I want to direct this?
It's, you know, it's like everything. You want to switch it up. You want to try new things. And I got this amazing script from Kurt Lemmer. I think he's here.
I think Kurt is right there.
And it's just like you read scripts, and you know, Kurt had gotten Jason involved, and I'd always been interested in working with Jason. Like I just saw so much potential and ability in him as an actor. And then here this script comes along, and it just felt like the movies I liked growing up, you know, like 48 Hours, or Beverly Hills Cop, or like Die Hard, or just that action sensibility, which is really, really, really hard to write, and really hard to structure, and really hard to pull off. Like people have no idea how hard it is. And so when a script comes along that has those ingredients and has that magic built in, yeah, I'm gonna dive on it.
So what, you have military connections, history with the military. How accurate, how much shit is actually going on that you've heard about that like is off books? Is that stuff, a lot of that stuff real, or is that all just Hollywood make-believe? I've always wanted to know.
You know, people sign paperwork and then things happen.
I'll leave it there and say maybe it's true. Maybe. So one of the things that I wish the opening 10 or 15 minutes of this movie could be seen by like every fucking person over the age of 70. So they could like actually understand what people are doing. That's one of the things I've really enjoyed about this, is like bringing in what's really going on with people instead of it being what a lot of us have seen again and again. So talk a little bit about trying to depict that as accurately as you can. Is what is on screen really the way it happens? Like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of sophisticated people out there who take a lot of money from people who are innocent, normal people. It's our friends, our family, our parents, and when I read that scene and I read the progression of it, and it was like stomach churning, and cold-blooded, and preying on the best of people for the worst reasons. And so it just sets the movie up perfectly, and it's hard to set these movies up so you actually care what's going on and you care what the hero's doing. Like, that's the hardest trick as a filmmaker. And something about having Felicia Rashad endure this, and she's so sympathetic and so lovable, and feels like the people we know, like a real person. So it's a great example of what you need to do to protect yourself, and it's a great example of the sophistication out there of how people get ripped off.
The thing that I couldn't believe is, I've seen the movie twice now, and I still, so how many people think this movie was filmed in Boston? Anybody? It was not. Where did you film this movie?
London.
I couldn't believe it. Like, so how did you end up, was it London due to tax breaks, or because you could get really good actors there? Was it a combination of what?
Kind of all the above. Like the reality is, when you write a script, you just write fade in tax rebate location. And then you just figure it out from there. So it's like the rebate you get on the money you spend, basically they give you money back. So it's more money you can put on the screen. And that's the difference in getting stuff made these days. So then it becomes like an exercise as a filmmaker of okay, now I'm running all over London and the countryside and trying to find locations that felt like the East Coast. And yeah, I mean, that's a credit to the production designer and the art team and locations.
One of the things that I think elevates this film is the supporting cast. When you have Jeremy Irons delivering exposition, you buy into it so much more than when an actor is doing it over the top or trying to, you know what I mean? Like, Jeremy Irons delivering those lines is like, oh, fucking Jeremy Irons. So talk a little bit about the whole supporting cast, because I think that's what elevates everything about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me as a director, I love actors. That's why I became a director, is I wanted to work with actors. And everything else is just an excuse to be on set with an actor. Like they're doing the real work, and they're so much more courageous than I am. I can't be in front of that camera. And they're out there dropping their soul. And so you want to work with the best actors possible. And it was kind of a miracle to get this cast. It was really exciting. I mean, I'm shooting Minnie Driver, and she's so amazing and has such presence and such credibility. You believe she could be running the CIA, and it's creating that sense of reality. Gemma Redgrave, who plays the president, incredible, sells it, her presence, getting an actor to have that, that presence, that command presence is not easy. And they pull it off flawlessly. And then obviously Jeremy Irons can read the phone book and it's gonna be enthralling. So it's just it's like a basketball team. You want the best players you can get.
This movie has a ton of action in it. And so talk a little bit about, I forget your second unit director's name. Is it Jeremy?
Jeremy Marinas, yeah.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about how you chose Jeremy for second unit, and maybe for people that aren't familiar, what a second unit director does, and how you collaborated with Jeremy to craft what people saw on screen.
So all the stunt work, everything's figured out ahead of time, for repeatability and safety. The choreography, everybody learns the choreography. Storyboard it, you'll do stunt viz. So like Jeremy would get the stunt brothers together, act out the scene, photograph it, come up with some ideas. You like this, you like that, you like this angle, you give notes. Jason has a lot of opinions about action. I mean, he is absolutely encyclopedic. He somehow literally knows every freaking punch ever thrown in cinema history. That was done in this, that was done in this, Magnus got 7 in this year. So it's so you really have to be on point with him. And Jeremy comes from the 8711 school, and is Chad's protege. And he's an artist in the sense that his grammar is how the human body moves, and he's one of the people with the best understanding of human kinetics that I've ever seen, ever. So it just, those guys I hire and they make me look good, and I get to pretend it's me being smart, but it's them being rock stars.
I think it's a collaboration because I'm going to say, I think you might have done a little.
I just look sad when they screw up and then they do better, that's all.
Well, one of the things though, the movie has a ton of action, so talk a little bit about the balance of putting what you can on screen with the time and budget that you have and the choices you have to make, because you might only have a day or two to film something when maybe in a bigger budget you would have 10 days.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's crazy on on a big show, like a big movie, $100+ million movie. You could have 2 weeks to do what we would do in a day, and so it really comes about being on the same page about the grammar, the language of the photography, right? And then I have to know. Like when I set up a shot, I'm literally like, okay, stunt player, 1300, this, that, the stunt pads, that equipment, that's gonna be 10K, repeatability, the extra catering. Like I have to think in money and budgets, and I think that's what makes me different from other directors. So I know how to like stretch a dollar and sheet. I call it like a high school play, right? Where it's like cardboard cutouts and like, oh, I'm a mermaid. It's all fake, right? So everyone kind of needs to just get off a high horse a little bit and roll up their sleeves and like, okay, how can we do this? The camera only sees what you pointed at. So if I point it here, I'm not worried about any of this, right? I don't care. I need that to work. And if I spend the money to make that work and don't worry about what's over here, I'm good. I can do it.
One of the things about Jason is that he knows lenses, cameras, where to stand, lighting, he knows all of that stuff. He's like him and Keanu just know it all in terms of action. So talk a little bit about collaborating with someone like that who knows as much as another, maybe a director, in terms of all that kind of stuff.
It's scary. It's like old school movie stars, and there's a difference between the generation that came up on film and the generation that came up on digital. With film, you have 1,000-foot mag, which is like 10 minutes of 24 frames. So you have, by the time you call action, you've already burned through, 1,000 feet. And then it takes a minute to reload the camera. It's not like a digital camera, which can have 30 minutes on a chip, and then you just swap cards and you're good. So with film, you have to be hyper-disciplined. And that old school discipline and how you have to light for film and the precision of lighting for film, trains these guys, like they know their angles, they know their lighting, they know their lights, and a good actor can walk on that set. He knows like, okay, key light's over here. I know they like me backlit, so I'm gonna keep my face here. They know their exact angles, their eye lines. You can see them like they'll cheat their heads and they'll look a certain way. It may look unnatural in person, but on the monitor, it can be stunning. And then you pick the right lens. So like when you shoot close-ups, it's typically like a specific lens choice. But how you move into that frame, and so like it's like you can tell like a classic film actor because before they move they do this. They look, then they go, and they know the timing, and it's so intuitive that it just makes it a pleasure to photograph them.
So talk a little about, so you get in the editing room, you have your assembly cut, whatever. Who do you trust for honest feedback on those early screenings when like you're still unsure what exactly is this movie?
That's the absolute worst part. Like you shoot the movie, yay, big accomplishment, it's so great. The movie's never better than like the first day you turn the camera on, and it's never worse than when you see the assembly, So it's like having a kid, except it's born inside out, and all the organs are outside of the body, and it's like absolutely horrifying. And like you have a good surgeon in the form of an editor to kind of fix it and put it back together, but I've never not been mortified by an assembly. And the later you can wait to show anybody your edit, the better, because it's like a patient open on the table, and there's work to do. This scene's running long. These beats aren't working, so it's a long process. But I have friends. I have my partner Chris. I have like my kids. My kids are like brutally honest. That sucks.
So for this film, did you have a longer cut? Was it a much longer cut? Like talk a little bit about how this film changed in the editing room, from assembly to what people saw tonight.
Yeah, so I think the assembly came in at 3 hours, and they always do. So it's like, a release scene could be like 30 seconds, and the assembly could be like a 3-4 minute scene, and so that adds up. But it's really about pacing. Like with this, it was shaping, and I wanted like the classic action thrill ride. Like, and in my movies, typically I have like a long burn first act because I'm setting up the world and character, and then once it goes, there's always going to be a certain point where like once you hook in, you're going. So for me, it was like really sticking to the spirit of like Kurt's script and getting it as like fine-tuned and fast and paced up and fine-tuned.
What was the, if you remember, what was the last thing you cut out before picture locking?
I don't remember. We dropped, you know, I'm pretty ruthless about, they always say you have to be able to kill your darlings, you know, so I'm the guy that's like, oh, let's cut this scene, and everyone else is like, no. So, you know, I'm pretty aggressive and pretty experimental, but I mean, towards the end, it was just really about finesse and really making the action work, and then I'd get like a call from Jason, hey mate, you gotta cut 2 frames off that one punch in reel 6. Yes, sir.
Well, you know, the other thing, I've spoken to a lot of filmmakers, and they say that after you're in the post for 6 months, you have to show it to people because you lose track of what's working, whether it be like, I've spoken to directors that they took out this joke because they thought it wasn't funny because they'd heard it 1,000 times.
That's absolutely it, is you can sort of become numb to your own work and what you're seeing, and that's why it's important to get in front of an audience. So like, I'm actually a big believer in the testing process, and they'll see things that you don't see, or if it's not working, trust me, they're gonna let you know.
What is actually Jason like? Because you mentioned he suggested cutting 2 frames, but how involved is he in post, and how much is he sort of like, don't show it to me until you're really close?
He was pretty involved in the edit. He wanted to see the assembly. You know, he's very smart about his brand and how he presents, and I think it's one of the reasons he is a star is because he understands what makes him look good and what works for him. And so for me, it's like, this guy's a star. It's his movie. I got to figure it out. I gotta make him look good. And you know, not every actor is kind of capable of doing that, because a lot of times they can be like really judgmental and get kind of nervous about their own work. He's confident. He comes from a confident place. But as a person, like, he's really normal and quiet. He's just like a guy. He's got a family. He's got kids. He's like all about his kids. Like, you're constantly adjusting schedules so he can go home and see his kids. So it's like he's really grounded and has great boundaries in a business that can blow through your boundaries.
One of the things about Jason, and I am a huge Jason Statham fan, but I will fully admit that sometimes in movies he does not like to take a punch, or he doesn't like to be beaten in any scene. I don't want to say it's in his contract, but it could be in his contract. That like I'm being honest, watch his movies again and see how many times he actually takes damage. It's very rare. So when I was watching this and he actually took damage, I was like, fuck, how did you pull this off?
I mean, it's.
I didn't mean to swear, but you get what I mean.
The greater the villain, the greater the hero. You know, if the hero takes a knee, we're gonna clap when he stands up. So it's like, it was a bit of a negotiation. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Again, I want everyone to rewatch Jason Statham movies. He does not get knocked down that often. He doesn't. But that's why I think one of the reasons that fight scene is so good is because it's brutal, hand to hand, all those mirrors, and then you know, he gets hit, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, what is this?
He can get hurt. If your hero can get hurt, it's you know, it's like you know, the Nolan's Batman movie. You know, Batman gets in a fight and he's got bruises, and it's like, oh wait, he's one of us. So it's you humanize the hero by having him be vulnerable.
Why? Listen, I love watching Jason Statham punch people in the face. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. What is it about Jason that we all love watching him punch people?
It's crazy. It's so compelling. It's this weird alchemy. I don't even know how to explain it or why it works, but it does. And I mean, you can build an entire film around that, and many have been built. So it's for me, it's like taking this thing we all love and connect with for some reason, and then creating like a better mousetrap, just making a more elevated version.
So I believe the film has, I could be wrong, like 6 action set pieces. So talk a little bit about how did you want to present them in terms of, like, does the first, you know what I mean, like talk a little bit about, because each one is different. So talk a little bit about what you wanted out of those set pieces, because, you know, people are coming to see the action, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a language, it's storytelling. So I always think, like, what is the story happening in this sequence? And, you know, when you look at Kurt's script, the action sequences are pretty true, and to what he'd written, because it's about character-based action. Like, how does the actor perform? What is the language? What is the grammar of the action? How do you make the action specific to that character? So and then you don't want to blow it out too soon. Like, you got to go somewhere. By the end, it gets pretty nuts, and he's like chewing through the Secret Service. You know, in the beginning, he's like, you know, whacking out a couple of guys. So that's where Jeremy is really strong, is finding a grammar and a language for each action sequence.
One of the things I really like when he walks up in front of the building and takes on all the FBI agents. So you filmed that on the street, and I heard people were watching. Do you enjoy when people are watching like that, or are you like, man, I wish it looks so good because we're out on location, but it would be so much better if we were on a soundstage?
I've always, you know, I started out shooting in the streets, and I like that energy, and I think, like, I'll be dead honest, it's cool to be able to share that with people, right? And it's like Piccadilly Circus, and, you know, there's people from all over the world visiting London, and, you know, we could have been jerks and put up barriers so nobody could see anything, and, you know, it's interesting. You go and you kind of interact with people, and you see what they're seeing, and it sort of reminds you that, you know, I'm not sitting in an office doing spreadsheets. I'm doing something really cool, and I'm really lucky to have this job, and I'm really lucky to be able to share it with other people.
I don't know if you want to answer this, but how long did you actually have to shoot this?
It's between me and the financier.
Right, okay, I'll leave it alone. Well, one of the things, though, is how did you decide, was there one sequence or one aspect of the film that you're like, we have to allocate more resources to this?
Yeah, I mean, you're always squeezing a balloon. You only got so much money, and you know, I always get told, yeah, it's your money, you decide, figure it out, it's your problem, okay? I've done it enough to instinctively know where I need to spend, and that end at the house where all those action sequences, it's like a reel and a half, almost 2 reels of continuous action. So I knew I needed the support, the second unit support, stunt support. It was also towards the end of the schedule, and if you've been on good behavior, you should have a little firepower left. So I had some money left and was able to, like, put it in that scene. But usually, like, you know where it's going to get absorbed.
Yeah, I don't know what you spent on this, but I'm impressed with what you put on screen based on what I'm feeling.
Like, no one believes the number. No one believes the number it was made for. Like, you can't do that with the money I was given. But if you're in the weeds and you actually, like, show up and you do your prep and you do your homework and you're ruthless about it, and you constantly solve, and you get screamed at by your partner because you're spending too much, and you can kind of figure it out.
Yeah, it's definitely worth an applause. One of the things, though, I think by filming in London, rather than say like Baton Rouge or whatever, you were able to get those actors because you're in London. Doesn't that like help?
Yeah, that's a thing. So like there's great stunt crews, there's great below the line, there's great amazing actors, and I'm a big fan of like the British actors because they come out of like, you know, the London School of Drama and you know, like Cambridge drama, and they have such good habits. Like when they read, like you can literally see them reading like the commas and the semicolons in the dialogue. It's like a little looser, dude. But it's you could definitely be a lighthouse and attract some amazing talent when you're in a city like London. Same in LA. Like when you shoot a movie in LA, like people are like, "What? I get to sleep in my own bed." So it helps.
Yeah, I try explaining this to people that if you actually shoot in LA, you're going to get a level of your whole supporting cast you're raising your game because you can say, you know, you're working from home.
Absolutely.
So we're just about out of time, but I just want to ask you real quick. Early in your career, you did Training Day, and I'm just, please. What was it like that early in your career, writing that movie and having Denzel deliver that performance? Like, can you sort of reminisce a little bit?
I mean, I've been writing scripts. I've written a couple, and kind of saw the game and hadn't really sold anything. And so I just wanted to write something for me. I wanted to write something I knew wouldn't sell. And then, I'm from South Central, I'm from the hood. Like, you hear all the stories from the homies, like this is happening, that's happening. So I just started writing shit down, being a scribe. And Hollywood thought, cops aren't like this, none of this stuff's real, you don't know what you're doing, you know anything about law enforcement. And then the Rampart scandal happened, which kind of like broke open, and they're like, oh, that's how they're rolling. Yeah, dude, no kidding. And Denzel got attached, and as co-producer on it, and it was the first time I got to see like a script go through the process of prep, the pre-production, physical production, and post-production, all the way through. And I watched Antoine on set, and I'm like, man, I want to be a director.
When you're writing now for yourself or for other people, how much when you're writing a scene are you thinking about, because you now know what things cost, so how much are you sort of editing to budget in your brain when you're writing a scene where you're like, well, this scene could cost $1 million, or I could do it this way and it's 100?
That's the whole game right there. Like, I literally have an Excel spreadsheet in my head, or I better be able to figure it out, because I have to like justify everything I do. So every scene, everything you do, at some point, there's going to be a DAC and meeting and multiple meetings and budgets from multiple departments. And so you have to know what you're doing and why. A lot of people just don't worry about it and they just do it. But that's how I'm able to get like this level of execution for the price, is because from script, I already know how I'm going to do that, how I'm going to shoot it. And someone may read it and like, oh, it's going to be 4 days and 600 grand. And like, no, I'll do it in a day, and all those assets will cost 90.
I don't know if I asked you at the beginning, and I can't remember. Do you know what you're doing next?
I am doing 11th Trade, going back to the UK and doing another movie with Jason based on a series of books.
Didn't know. Are you filming this year? Is it that far where it's filming?
Yeah, we're gonna shoot in spring.
Right on.
Yeah.
Is this something that could be like multiple movies, or is this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a series of, it's Chuck Dixon, I think he worked on Punisher, and he's done some Marvel stuff. He did a series of 10 novels. So it's kind of like, former military dude, who punches guys in the face.
Thumbs fucking up. Well, by the way, that if Jason is willing to do another project with you, you know what that means?
What?
He likes you.
I think he tolerates me.
I don't know, man. Like this looks a lot bigger than I think you had the money, and I think that he must have, and I've spoken to Jason, and he likes working with actors and surrounding him the way you did. I think, you know what I mean? This is a good fucking movie, man. Like, I think he had a good time.
No, we got along. Like, it was actually a great collaboration, and you go to set, you're exhausted, it's another day of a zillion days, it's 4 a.m. and you're dragging yourself in there. And then I see Jason, and it's like he's smiling, I'm smiling, we catch up, we hang out. That's not normal. A lot of times it can just be very kind of like very straightforward, very professional. So, to be able to like collaborate and feel safe and enjoy like working with someone that talented is like a gift. And then when that happens and when that connection happens, it just raises everyone's game.
So a few quick things as we wrap up. Number one, I want to remind everyone to validate your parking before you go to the garage. Please save money. Number two, if you enjoyed this movie, there's this thing called social media. Please spread the word without spoilers. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, a huge thank you to IMAX Amazon MGM, and David Buckner for coming out tonight to do the Q&A. Thank you all. Have a fantastic night.